Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Good.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Give me a moment to just set up my tech. I'm going to get the wonderful Shay to help me. Have you received that co-host option, Shay? I think if you claim co-host, you should be able to help me let people in and out. Let's see. It's so lovely to see you all. As always, if you're able to join us with your camera on, that would be wonderful. If you can't, that's also completely fine. I understand, but it's so lovely for me to see your faces, and so many of you, and more coming on in. Okay, just one more moment. We'll let a few more people in. Shay, are you good? Are you no, what's happening? Let's see. I also can't hear you. Sorry, my love.
There we are. You might be able to hear me now. I'm not in as co-host.
Okay. How's that?
Let's see.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome. I'm so delighted to share Kali codes with you. I literally am bursting with excitement. Let me know in the chat where you are dialing in from. We've already got some people in the US. Somebody messaged me this morning who's in Ukraine. She's going to be joining us, so that's incredible. I'd love to know whereabouts in the world you are. I'm sure many of you in Australia. What are we up to? 44 women from so many different locations: Sydney, Central Coast, Kansas, USA, Portland, USA, Brisbane, Victoria, Cairns, New Jersey, lots of Americans. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. So let's just take a moment to settle into our bodies. So I'm going to invite you to gently close down your eyes, to relax your shoulders, to take a couple of deeper breaths, just to bring yourself fully into the present moment. I've just completed the school run and then a tidy up of my house and a bit of a sage cleanse. So I'm feeling very ready, but also just like I've been a little busy. So let's just drop into present being. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, wherever you are, the First Nations people, their wisdom, their knowledge of country, and to acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging. And for me, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Let's also acknowledge all of our teachers in their many, many forms. And I'll be telling some stories about teachers today, including the teachings that come in the form of divine intervention, divine light, and the teachers in human form, animal form, the teachers that are the beauty of the natural environment where we live. And then finally, let's acknowledge the wisdom keepers from our own personal culture and ancestry. So whatever your heritage, whatever your cultural background, and that might be mixed, just acknowledging that there are great wisdom keepers, great truth tellers, women of bravery and strength in your lineage. And there may also be some stories of perpetration. There may be some stories that have a shadow side within your lineage too. But for all of us, the wisdom keepers, the wise women, were also there. Beautiful. And then as you feel ready, just gently opening your eyes. It's so lovely to see you. And thank you for so many of you being here with your camera on, over 50 women in the room. And we had hundreds of women sign up for Kali Codes. So I know many of you will also be watching the replay. Thank you for joining me. It's so interesting, Kali Codes. I'll tell you, this time last year, and some of you were there, I taught Lakshmi Codes. And there was a 3-day event very similar to this. Now, Lakshmi was a no-brainer. She is the householder goddess. Many of you will know her as the goddess of abundance and benevolence. She brings blessings. She brings sometimes material abundance, but also all of the blessings that we're looking for in our lives. And it was very easy for me to put Lakshmi Codes on, and to talk about Lakshmi Codes, and to talk about Lakshmi, because it's very benevolent and peaceful and easily relatable. And really, what Lakshmi does, I keep saying Kali because I'm so in the Kali zone. What Lakshmi does is she invites us to connect with that side of us. It's very much in the softer, gentler divine feminine, the nurturing divine feminine. And I knew at that time that I wasn't ready to share Kali Codes. And it has nothing to do with whether you guys are ready. It's from the number of people that have shown up today and the number of people that signed up with great ease and flow, you guys are definitely ready. But for me to hold space for Kali Codes is a whole other energy. Kali is a different vibe. But I went to India earlier this year and we visited a Kali temple. And I feel like that's where I really started to prepare for these 3 sessions and to be really ready to share them with you. So today I want to give you a taste of some of the stories of Kali and the energy of Kali and who Kali is. And I really would love, my greatest intention for today's session, we have an hour together, is for you to go away feeling the pulsation of some of the energy of Kali. So it's not about necessarily understanding anything or having any kind of intellectual or conceptual resonance or learning, although, you know, hopefully you'll get some of that along the way, but to really embody the feeling. And one of the things I notice in my work, I work a lot with, well, I work pretty much only with women. I have 4 sons. Now I have a young daughter. So I used to always joke, the reason I only work with women is because I have enough masculine energy at home, which is definitely true. I've got 4 sons and 2 of them are teenagers. So, you know, sometimes people say, oh, do you only work with women because you don't like men? And I'm like, no, 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 I have to love men. I've got 4 of them in my daily life, but they very much fill my cup with the masculine energy. So then when it comes to my spiritual practice and my work in the world, it's all the beautiful women's teachings and hanging out with women like you, because that's definitely fills my cup in a completely different way. So it's really, yeah, it's such a pleasure for me to be able to spend this time with you. And what I really want for you and for me and for all of us is to embrace and embody the feeling tone. In yogic teaching, we have the 5 koshas, the 5 layers of ourselves. You might be familiar with this. And 2 of those are Vijnanamaya kosha and Manomaya kosha. Manomaya kosha is the realm of the mind and the intellect, and Vijnanamaya kosha is the realm of emotions and feelings. And then we also have Pranamaya kosha, which is the energetic presence or the subtle body. And my hope today is that we all get to drop into the energetic imprint, which is the Pranamaya kosha, and also the emotional and feeling imprint, which is the Vijnanamaya kosha. And perhaps one of the reasons why I've been hesitant to bring Kali into my offerings is because one of the initial experiences that you may have in really connecting with Kali energy is one of fury, outrage, discontent, and a feeling of enough is enough. But I also witness and notice in the women that I am working with, and I was just referencing that before, you know, what I notice again and again with the women I work with is so many of us, and I include myself in this, we always teach what we most need to learn, struggle with the challenge of trusting ourselves, struggle with the challenge of standing in the center of our own power and autonomy. We outsource decision making, we outsource our happiness in many ways. and we feel a lot of confusion. We find it very difficult to really be focused and to prioritize that which is important. You know, our energy can get very scattered. And part of that is because the culture that we live in is what in Ayurveda we would call very vata. So it invites us to become very scattered, right? Even the internet, I mean, this beautiful opportunity that we have to meet together, it brings our consciousness outwards into a kind of scattered experience. Like looking at all your beautiful faces right now in these little boxes on the screen, that's kind of very vata inducing. It doesn't create a sense of linear focus. Kali's energy is all about self-trust. It's about precision decision making. It's about supreme clarity, right? Very different to Lakshmi, which is like, Lakshmi is like, here are my arms, come into them, let me hold you, everything's going to be okay, right? That's Lakshmi vibes. Kali is, you're going to have to do some work for this one. Like, you're going to have to say no to some stuff. You might feel a little bit uncomfortable. You might have some emotions of, you know, anger, rage, upset, frustration arising within you. And then you're going to have to process those and figure out what you want to do with them. And so it's very, very powerful work, but it's also confronting. So let's dive in with all of that said. And if anyone's just like, you know what, I'm just so not up for that, I all respect and, you know, pranams to you. Feel free to jump out and come back in when you do feel ready, because it's definitely not, honestly, not for the faint of heart, this work. Like this is the work of boundaries and clarity and clear decision making. So let me tell you a little bit about my experiences with Kali, and then we'll kind of step into more kind of general teachings, I guess. When I was 18 years old, I went to India for the second time with my boyfriend at the time, a guy who I was with for a long time, beautiful, beautiful man. He's the reason I now live in Australia. We're not together anymore. We haven't been for a long time, but he was a beautiful traveling companion, very spiritual man. And we were spending some time in Delhi, obviously very young. He's a couple of years older than me, but he was in his early 20s. I was 18, babies. And there we are in Delhi in the late 1990s, traveling around. And we're really interested in spiritual things. We were both deep spiritual seekers. And we were going to every temple, every ashram. We were sitting in meditation. We were just soaking it all up. And one afternoon, we went to the Baha'i temple, which is in the middle of Delhi, and it's very, very quiet and peaceful and completely silent and manicured and pristine and clean. Like, it's a temple that's pretty much on the inside almost empty. It's a dome shape, a little bit like the Opera House, but if the Opera House was a dome. And then it's got this beautiful lotus flower. Like, the whole building is basically an enormous lotus flower. To get in, it's like a gated kind of entry. The gardens are all manicured, very quiet, very serene, very still, very spiritual. Like, the minute you step into the Baha'i temple, you feel, even just in the grounds, this real sense of peace, the peace that comes with silence, serenity, stillness. And we spent quite a lot of time there. We sat and meditated. We were there for a few hours, and I really loved it. And I felt like something was missing. It felt, you know what it was? The fact that it was a gated community, it's like the hubbub of India was kept out. And then within this gated, manicured, beautiful temple was peace and serenity. But it was not integrating what was happening on the outside, right? So it's a little bit like when we connect, and I know that, especially those of you who are parents, I know that you're going to know what this is like. It's like when we go into a really deep, beautiful meditation, right? Or we go to a women's circle, or we, you know, whatever makes you feel really nourished, like have a beautiful, relaxing bath, or do some ritual ceremony. And then one of your kids, or could be your partner, could be anyone really, but it's usually kids or partner, says something triggering to you, and you're 10 minutes out of your beautiful, you know, I've completely reset myself, my nervous system is at peace state, and you just bite their heads off. You know, you're like, oh. and so frustrated, possibly even more frustrated because they've spoiled your Zen. Has anyone else ever had that experience? Raise your hand if that's resonating. Right. And then you kind of beat yourself up because you think, oh, I thought I was so relaxed and Zen, and now I've just like snapped. And does that mean this spiritual stuff isn't working? It doesn't mean the spiritual stuff isn't working. What it means is that we have compartmentalized and we've created the sanctuary within, but it's not actually absorbed or penetrated by everything else that goes on outside. And then we have to do this job of trying to kind of keep everything else away because we've got to maintain our serenity, right? The truly spiritual people, the masters, the women that I have seen who are walking the talk of yoga, of higher thinking, of true spiritual mastery, are not ruffled by any external circumstance. They don't have to preserve their serenity by forceful means. Everything is welcome, all is welcome, and they remain at peace. And for me, this is the gold standard, right? And I'm certainly not saying I'm even close to being there yet, but it's like invite it all in and still maintain your center, still maintain your integrity, still maintain your sense of self. Even people who are offensive or have a different opinion to you or are just irritating, the difficult situations, the difficult human interactions, they become part of your spiritual practice. So anyway, I realized quite quickly that was why the Baha Temple was not fully resonating for me. Like, it was lovely, but it wasn't integrated. So as we were leaving, we met a gentleman at the gates as we were stepping back out into the street. And he said, oh, do you want to come and see the Kali temple? It's just across the road. It's like walking distance. And my boyfriend was like, oh, I think we've done enough temples for today. And I was like, no, I want to see the Kali temple, please. And so we walked across the road, very brief walk. And suddenly we were in the polar opposite experience. Bells ringing, incense burning, people shouting, chanting. I mean, just utter, like, beautiful, colorful chaos. So full on. Crowds, people pushing, noise, just the full spectrum of human experience. People laughing, people crying, homeless people living on the street, wealthy people coming out of expensive cars to pay their respects to Kali, like just the full smorgasbord of the human experience. And for me, it was one of the strongest spiritual awakenings of my life, that moment, stepping into that temple. I really felt what we sometimes call Shaktipat, which is the divine blessing that kind of shocks you out of your stuckness, right? I really got a hit of Shaktipat in that moment, where I just realized that embracing the chaos and the full spectrum of a life lived engaged with life and love and noise and pain and suffering and all of it is what we're here to do. It's what we're here to do. And when we do that, when we embrace that, we're living a full life, even if there's pain, suffering, struggle, and it's confronting. And so for many, many, many years after that experience, I reflected like that. The imprint of that Kali temple stayed with me. I don't know if you've ever had a moment in your life, I'm sure you have, where there's almost like a snapshot, like a freeze frame that you go back to and you remember this moment, like you're looking at a postcard or a photograph or something like that, and it kind of takes you back to the feeling tone of that time and place. Maybe it's a holiday. For some people, it might be like when they meet their love or when they birth their baby. That's often these really strong moments. The moments in that Kali temple where I got that download about life in all its beautiful complexity really stayed with me, like, for decades. Anyway, this year, the beginning of this year, and I'm just turned 46 this year, so we're talking nearly 30 years later, I took a group of women to India on a pilgrimage retreat, and I was determined, because we were going to be in Delhi, let's do the Baha'i temple and let's go to the Kali temple. Now, 30 years later, I didn't even know if it was still going to be there. But I really wanted to have the women experience this with me. And we managed to do both. We went to both temples and it was extraordinary. The Kali temple was quite a mission because they don't let Westerners in. It's a private closed temple. And it was had gotten much bigger than it was 30 years ago. So it was big physically, but also huge numbers of people wanting to get in. Like literally people queuing around the block, like just incredible dedication. It reminded me, because in the line, people coming into the temple, there was a lot of chanting and a lot of people chanting to Kali, as like the lineup was almost as exciting and interesting as actually getting into the temple itself. And it reminded me, as a kid, sometimes my father would take my brother and I to the football in England, and we'd line up and everyone would be singing their football chants, which can sometimes degenerate into, you know, fighting and hooliganism, which doesn't happen in the Kali temple. But I still got that same feeling, that kind of feeling of like a group of people brought together with a common purpose and a lot of excitement. And we weren't there on a special day. I kept asking, is this like have we just come on a special like temple day or like a special Kali holiday or something? Because there's so many people and they're so excited. No, just a regular Tuesday. And then we got to the inner area where you get to kind of get the blessing from the priest, and you get to offer your offerings to Kali, and we got to take puja and go through the ritual, and it was a really magical experience. One of the things that really resonated with me from that particular experience was, as we were lining up, and this tells you something about Kali and Kali's energy, as we were lining up to get into the temple, there were people in a sort of separate queue or a separate row beside us who were doing full body prostrations towards the temple. And like I said, it was a long lineup. Like, I don't even think you can imagine a queue this long in Australia. No one's ever queued for something this long in Australia. We just don't even have the population for it. And people were coming in beside us as we were standing, and literally would stand, fall down on their knees, full body prostration, arms forward, head down to the earth, to the ground, which was just regular dirty ground, no carpet, nothing. And then come back up to standing, namaskar, up, down. So it's almost like doing a sun salutation kind of movement all the way into the temple, like very arduous on your physical body and also time consuming, like a real commitment. And I remember asking somebody, one of the beautiful women in the line, who was kind of giving me some guidance about what was going on, because it was, you know, no one spoke, there were no translations happening or anything like that. It wasn't for a Western crowd. You know, my immediate thought, right, and this is the Western mind, this tells you the difference between being self-oriented and not self-oriented. My immediate thought was, oh, they want something. They're asking for something. They want Kali to give them a blessing, some money, or perhaps there's a sickness that they want to be cured, or they're looking for a job promotion, or whatever it might be. They're doing the prostrations as a way of manifestation, essentially. They're asking the goddess for her blessing, because why else would you go through such an arduous task? And bear in mind, boiling hot as well, really hot weather. And this lady explained to me, no. They are returning to the temple to thank Kali for the blessings in their lives. They're returning because the cancer has gone away, the job promotion has happened, the family has been reconciled, food is abundant, the harvest was good. You know, their pranam is in gratitude. And it was such a poignant moment for me of realizing we don't need to always be asking. Sometimes the energy that is the most potent is to sit exactly where we are and to be in gratitude for this moment exactly as it is. And I think for many of us who are spiritual seekers, and I've been a spiritual seeker my whole life, I consider that I've been on a healing journey my whole life. I'm very used to being in the mode of healing something, right? I'm working on something. I'm working through something. I want my relationships to be better. I want my business to be more abundant. I want my kids to be happier. I want my home to be prettier. You know, it's like always striving, healing, working. And the teaching that Kali brings, and Lakshmi energy is a little bit of that, like, give me abundance. The teaching that Kali brings is you are already enough. You have enough. You are enough. It's an abundant universe. Look around and be grateful. And actually, a little bit of stop asking all the time. A little bit of like, how about you just be content for a second? One of my sons, my 10-year-old, is a master of what I call the upsell. And I'm always joking about this with him. So if we go to the supermarket, he'll start nagging in the car on the way there. Can I have a lolly? Can I have a lolly? Can I have a lolly? He's very good at it. And I'll be like, okay, you can have one lolly. Everyone can choose one thing, one treat, right? We get there and then he'll choose like some micro mini little lolly. And he'll be like, can I have this one and this? Or can I have this one and a toy? Or like, he's very good at, like, as soon as he gets what he wants, immediately he's going to be an entrepreneur. I'm sure he'll be very wealthy. He's on to the next, like, but can I also have this? Can I also have that? And then eventually he'll give up when it's like a hard no, but he's very good at that. And this is what we do as fully grown adults, you know, and honestly, it's one of the toxic things that happens a lot in the spiritual path, this constant desire for betterment. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be trying to better ourselves, but at what point do we just go, today I feel healed. Today I feel well in my body. Today I feel nourished. The weather's beautiful. My home is, I'm safe. I mean, for goodness sake, just look at what's going on in the world. It's just, isn't it just enough? Every woman on this call that we have homes and that we are safe. We are sheltered from the elements. We have fridges full of food. That in itself is enough. So Kali's medicine, before I start telling you about all the things she wants us to say no to, which are many, her true medicine is the full body prostration to thank you for everything I already have. And so what that could look like very, very simply is a gratitude practice. You know, one of the prompts that I've shared with you for today in the workbook and in the email that you got this morning with the link in it, there's a link there that you can go and I made a beautiful playlist for you, which I've been listening to all week. And there's also a simple workbook that has some notes and some prompts. And one of the prompts for today is very, very simple gratitude practice. Start your day by remembering all the things that all the abundance that's already present. And not just externally, yes, that's beautiful, but internally too. Like, how much time do you spend reflecting on how much you've healed? You know, I often think to myself, if I didn't have the practices of yoga and I hadn't spent so much of my life dedicated to spiritual practice, I think I'd be a pretty dysfunctional human being. I mean, I still have moments of being highly dysfunctional, but without all these practices, it would be a train wreck. So, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful that I get to show up as a good parent, a good enough parent, you know, as a good friend, to be of service to you in this community. These things are such beautiful blessings. So that's the first aspect of really beginning to honor Kali energy. And another way of doing that is to create some sort of altar or sacred space. One of the things I did in preparation for these 3 sessions with you guys is I went through my home and I picked flowers and I made the altars all beautiful and I burned incense and I put up some new pictures and just really like honed in on the Kali energy. And the Kali energy is ferocious too. It's not all, you know, rainbows and unicorns and Lakshmi with her abundant coins dripping out of her fingertips. I mean, there's Lakshmi, right? With her hands with lotus flowers, very pink and beautiful and serene, and then money pouring out of her hands. And then we've got Kali with her tongue sticking out, enraged, with a necklace of skulls. So let's talk about that story once we've dropped into the gratitude. Part of building, and I've learned this in my life, I really, truly have. Part of building a life that you can feel content within and grateful for also involves a lot of saying no. It involves a lot of really clear boundaries. I met up with a friend this weekend, and she is an acupuncture practitioner. She's a very, very special practitioner. She's been practicing for 30 years. She's a master healer. She heals a lot of people. She has a gift, and her main modality is acupuncture. And we were talking, both of us, admitting freely, which is quite rare in so-called spiritual circles, but we're good friends and we're both honest people. We were talking about how hard it can be sometimes to keep up with our own practices. You know, she was like, I struggle so often to do the things that I'm telling all my clients to do, all the self-care and the asana practice and the dinacharya and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, me too, you know. And then we spoke about the things that we are our non-negotiables that we're really good at maintaining, and the other things that are kind of on the wish list, right? We've all got the wish list of things that we wish we did more of, right? And it was really lovely to have that honest conversation with her, and just both of us acknowledge that it's hard in this present culture and time to stay focused on what's important. And I use the phrase counterculture, like we're rebels. If we're living in a way that is eating well, enjoying the sunshine, not spending ridiculous amounts of time on your phone and in front of screens, connecting with people authentically, you know, all the things that we know are good, having good sleep hygiene, sleeping enough, like basic things. You got to work hard for that stuff. You got to say no to a whole bunch of things that are very easy to say yes to. How many times have you picked up your phone, and this is just one tiny example, to do something like, I don't know, a task, like answer an email or do a bank transfer or something, and lost an hour of your life? Just gone. And then not even accomplished the task, right? Or said to yourself, I'm going to go to bed by a certain time because I'm really going to focus on prioritizing sleep. And then again, lost an hour and a half. All of a sudden it's 11 p.m. or later. It happens so easily. What is required, and it's not a sexy word, and it's not something that people love to hear, but actually what is required is discipline. We are required to have discipline, and Kali brings discipline. So I was also thinking about some of the other, because I really want to be clear that although I'm a yogi and I love yogic teachings, for me, Kali is an archetype, right? So you don't have to be Hindu or absorbed in the Hindu teachings or the yogic teachings to appreciate the archetypal energy of Kali. And there are other archetypes that have the same energy. So before I talked about Kali, I wanted to also mention Artemis, right? So Artemis is the Greek goddess who, and there are many different forms of Artemis. Diana, there's a Roman incarnation. Like, she's also an energy that has sort of spanned long periods of time. She had a collective of women around her, right? She had a group of women that were her well-wishers, her supporters, but also like just the women she had fun with. And they would go off into the forest and they would hang out. And it was just like, I imagine it like some kind of awesome ancient women's circle. You know, they danced and they ate and they hung around talking and just doing all the things that women do when they're nourished and healthy and well and spending time together. And Artemis's weapon or tool of choice was a bow and arrow. And any man that came into their vicinity when these sacred gatherings were happening, he got the bow and arrow treatment. There was no all are welcome here. No, you're not welcome. This is a closed space. And now you're going to see the precision of my bow and arrow. Or if she was feeling benevolent, she would turn them into a bear. So it was one or the other. Anyone that was a perpetrator, anyone that said anything that was a little bit off or made any one of her women feel uncomfortable or, you know, exercised a power hierarchy, instant bow and arrow. No discussion, no conversation, just. In Ayurveda, there is a teaching, and the teaching is called Tejas. And Tejas is part of Pitta, which is the fire element, which is very much my dominant dosha. And Tejas is the energy of the arrow that has super clarity. There's no time to be wasted. There's no ifs or buts. It's the line is drawn. And sometimes we get to that point with ourselves, right? Like, have you ever been trying to give something up? Like, for me, these days I don't drink alcohol and I don't drink caffeine. I don't drink coffee. But there were times in my life where I did both, never really to excess, but I knew I wanted to give them up. And then you kind of have these like very irritating, and I'm sure you've all been through different permutations of this, conversations with yourself. You give up for a week and then you have a coffee, and then you're having a coffee every day again, or your friend has a glass of wine, so you have a glass of wine with her, and like blah, 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 backwards, forwards, the kind of soupy place of, I really want to do this thing, but I'm not resolved enough. Right. Or it might be something you're trying to add in, like a meditation practice, and you do it every day and then you drop off. Right. We've all been in that. It's sort of a low level cycle of addiction, and then the opposite of addiction. Kali's energy, Diana's energy, Artemis energy comes when we say enough. No more. I no longer drink alcohol. I no longer imbibe caffeine. I meditate every day. It just is what it is. We're not negotiating with ourselves. It's often not about anyone outside of ourselves. It's just within us. I don't do this thing anymore. I used to get very, very embroiled. I mean, it's part of the reason I'm divorced, in bickering with my ex-husband. It was a really toxic trait in our relationship. And now we're co-parenting 4 children. And at some point in the last couple of years, I just decided I'm not bickering with him anymore. It's done. I don't have time in my life for this energy. We're finished with this. So I either let things go or I just assert myself, and it is what I'm saying it's going to be. And that I sort of move between those two energies, rather than and trying to persuade him or convince him or cajole him or nag him. No, it's just the arrow, the tejas, the clarity. Now, Kali teaches us very, very clearly, with a beautiful story, beautiful mythology, that this isn't always the way. So I want you to understand that Kali energy needs to be utilized with discernment. Because if we're all Kali, we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. And this is exactly what happens to Kali. So Kali, if you see images of her, and there are many different variations, I encourage you to Google it and have a look at some of the different depictions, because they're beautiful and intriguing. But usually hibiscus is her flower. So if you're wanting to create an altar or think about, imagery for Kali, it's always the hibiscus flower. And usually she's depicted with a necklace of skulls around her neck, right? And so much like Artemis with the bow and arrow, who's just, these days it's really trendy to say, this isn't about men and women, it's just about the masculine and the feminine. No. In this story, in this narrative, we're talking about men and women. We're talking about women and men, not the masculine and the feminine, the actual gendered experience of being a woman, and a binary experience of what that's like. And that may or may not resonate for you, and I'm not making any judgment or commentary on whether or not it does, but certainly the mythology is very clear about this. So there's something about the women when they come together in these sacred spaces that holds a different kind of energy to spaces that are mixed gender or spaces that are male only. And I think these mythologies really exemplify that. So anyway, Kali, her version of the bow and arrow that gets rid of all the, toxic men, is that she just beheads them. So and with Kali in her mythology, it's specifically ex-lovers. So she's a woman of the world, and she's had many ex-lovers, and she's indulged in sensory delight many times. But then most of them at some point have annoyed her. And so they basically get beheaded. And the skulls that she wears around her neck are like a warning sign to any man that wants to mess with her. They are the skulls of her beheaded ex-lovers. And I sometimes think about this in the context of the Me Too movement. Just to go on a slight tangent, I'm writing a book at the moment, and a lot of the teachings I'm sharing with you here will be in the book, and it's a lot about women's work. And I've been thinking in the first few chapters of the book a lot about the Me Too movement, because when the Me Too movement happened a few years ago, really bubbled up, even though I knew that most women have experienced some kind of perpetration sexually, I was shocked at how many women have experienced sexual predators, sexual perpetration. And I think we all were. And even for me, going through this work and having been thinking about this consciously and healing myself for a long time, as I was writing, just very recently, I was thinking about all the times that I have felt violated sexually, and even just leaving out verbal, which is a whole other thing, but just physically, times when someone's touched me inappropriately, and some of them are really clear. Like, there've been incidents where it's been like a school teacher and I was a student, and it's like utterly not okay. And then some of them are like a little bit more nuanced. But what shocked me was how many times, when I really started to think about it properly, how many times I've had those experiences. Like, it was like, okay, it's twice, it's three. Oh, there was that time. That's four, five, six. Like, what? Like, it's happened a lot. And it's become so normalized, or just something that we deal with, that it almost doesn't even like get register. And so Carly's energy is zero tolerance of that kind of bullshit. Like, and the energy is so strong that perpetration happens less because the boundaries are there. Now, all of that said, and all of that in mind, and I think that type of energy, for example, would be really good to teach to teenage girls, let's say. There is also the point at which it goes too far. So Carly is married to Shiva. They've obviously got some kind of polyamorous arrangement because he's okay with all the skulls and the lovers and what have you. But at some point, they get into an argument, and she loves Shiva, and he's her partner. They're consorts. They're together for not just life, for eons. And she gets annoyed with him, and she's got a bit bloodthirsty. She's gone a little bit too far. She's too angry. The feminists of the 80s that were kind of just like man-hating, suit-wearing, like, I always think of that character in The Devil Wears Prada, Meryl Streep's character. Just a little bit too in their masculine. She chops off Shiva's head and then she stamps on him. So which I love as a final, It's like, I'm not just going to chop your head off, I'm going to also just stamp on you. And I did a Instagram post this week, some of you will have seen it, where I said, there was a picture of Carly stamping on Shiva, and it said, for, Carly Codes, come along if you've ever felt like trampling on a man. And I got so many DMs, so many people just were like, laughing emojis, and just like, yeah, we've had our moments of that. Then she looks down at her bedraggled, beheaded husband, the love of her life, her soulmate, and she realizes, oh, I've overdone it. I've become so full of rage, and my boundaries are so clear, and I'm so in my power that actually all the softness is gone, all the heart, all the compassion, all the nuance, and I've stuffed up, and now I've killed the person who I love the most. I'm destroying everything. And so she starts to weep, and Shiva, in his infinite compassion, resurrects himself and comes back to life, and basically admonishes her and says, just don't go too far. Stay in your power. That's what I love you for. But also just remember, we're all human and we're all doing our best, and you can't chop everyone's head off. Right? Because sometimes when we go into that mode, in modern terms, psychology, if we look at psychological models as another archetype, it would be the avoidant patterning, right? Where we decide to shut ourselves off from everything. I don't want to, I don't want to interact with the world because the world is bad. I'm going to isolate myself. I don't want to be in a relationship because men are bad. I'm going to isolate myself. Just very like that avoidant attachment, because we've been hurt. And this is the truth of what Carly's energy is. She's been hurt by these men. Like, she's suffering, and she's fighting. She's bloodthirsty because she's fighting for her life, it feels like. And so the very powerful, beautiful teaching of Carly, and I would be completely lying to you if I said that I've got this figured out. So if you're coming to Carly Codes hoping for me to have a magic wand and explain this to you, I can't, because it's still a work in progress in my own life. But the beautiful teaching of Carly is the full power, the full boundaries, the clarity, the no, the direction of an arrow, and the softness to still love, to still be compassionate, to still be emotionally available, and to still say yes to life, to not destroy and blow everything up, to not disassociate, to not detach, to not avoid, to be in life in all its messy, luscious confusion, but with clear boundaries, with absolute steadiness, with strength, and with a focus and a clarity. That's the energy that Kali brings. That's the promise of Kali. And for me personally in my life, I feel like it's a daily dance. It's daily work, right? To find that balance. Sometimes I'm too surrendered and I'm too forgiving and I'm too naive and mushy and procrastinating and boundaryless. And other times, more often than not with me, because of my pitta, I'm too angry and too forceful and too one-directioned. And the beautiful, true place of healing, the sweet spot, is between those two. It's in the dance between those two. And what I'm, hopeful to explore with you over the next few days, and for you to explore in your life, is how do we do that dance? What does that dance look like? Now, for many of you, your personal exploration is to notice yourself swaying between those two energies. What I do know is, for many of you, you will be more on the side of being too passive, too forgiving, too not honoring of your own direction and your own arrow. And so my invitation would be, and if you're the pitta fire type that's got too much rage and fight, you'll know that. You don't need me to tell you. But for many of you, my invitation would be, find the clarity, find the fire, start chopping some heads off, right? Start turning some people into bears and sending them on their way. This is the energy that we really want to embody. Just to mention a couple of other embodiments of this energy, in Buddhism, it would be the white Tara. So we have green Tara, who is the benevolent, kind. She's more the Lakshmi vibes. White Tara has a lot more fire about her. She's got a lot more of that Kali energy. And then within Christianity, it would be Mary Magdalene, who was so ostracized by the church that they just kind of labeled her a prostitute and refused to make her a saint. But that's changing now. There's a big resurrection. And inside my membership program, Bhakti Club, we did a whole study of Mary Magdalene, because the church really did her a disservice. She was the Kali energy of the empowered feminine, and also looks very likely, from the historical reading I've done, which is reasonably extensive, that she was truly Jesus's best friend. Like, actually, her and Jesus were best friends, and she had a lot of pizzazz, a lot of fire energy, a lot of clear boundaries and straight talking. And the patriarchy did what the patriarchy does, which is to say, you're a little bit too outspoken, particularly, a couple of thousand years ago. You're a little bit too outspoken. We're going to, make sure that your history doesn't remember you as anything special. And if you think those things aren't happening anymore, those things are still happening. Those things are still happening a lot. I had a situation this week, and I'll tell you about this. I'm not going to give any specifics, but it was a real Kali moment for me. So I had a situation where I was working with someone who is a man. He's a nice man. He's a good man. We've done some good work together in the past. I'm not going to demonize him. And something in the collaboration that we were working on went wrong. There was a mistake that was made, and it was his mistake, right? And I called him up, and because I'm in my Kali years, in the past, I would have just fudged around it and kind of tried to fix it and been non-confrontational, definitely. But these days, I'm much more skilled at being confrontational, but without being angry or aggressive. So I called him up and I said, look, this thing has happened. It's gone wrong. It's not how it should be. Can we please get it fixed? And I didn't even say it's your fault, but it should have been completely obvious to him that it was his error, right? He immediately, like some kind of episode of Mad Men, blamed his secretary and just totally threw her under the bus, right? So and this is a moment of poor calibration on my part, because he was very persuasive and sort of inviting me to join him in blaming the secretary. So I'm on the phone and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. Oh, that's frustrating. And even got a little bit drawn into talking to him about how annoying it is when you can't get good people working for you, right? Put the phone down, felt so icky. I just felt like, what just happened? I just enabled this guy to take no responsibility and to blame a woman for something that she didn't do, right? And then my first thought after that was, I need to go to the woman and apologize to her, because I felt like he's now going to go and tell her off, right? She's going to be in trouble. So my first thought was, I need to go and talk to his secretary, who I do have contact with, and tell her I'm sorry for what happened. But then I thought about it a little bit more. This is all, it's not as clear as Kali or Artemis or Mary Magdalene, but it's all part of the same threads of patriarchy and how we think as women. I realized, why am I going and telling her and not just confronting him? I need to go back to him and say, sorry, I don't think what you said was fair, and I'm feeling really bad that I supported you in that. And can you please take personal responsibility? I haven't done it yet. I'm sitting on it because I'm Pitta and I sometimes react a little bit too. So I have to be careful. I have to sleep on things and not chop heads off, because that could happen. But you understand the story, right? You've all been in similar types of situations. We get drawn into things, and then before we know it, we're like, hang on a minute, what's happening here? Why am I behaving like this? And we can often feel really stuck and really unable to see clearly. The energy that Kali brings, and that, of course, it's the week of Kali codes. There's no way that I couldn't see this clearly. That I was driving in my car and the download just came. I was like, it's got nothing to do with the secretary. I have to go back to him. I have to go back to the source. But it took a while for all of that to process. And I know that many of you have had similar stories or experiences in your own life where something has left you feeling a little bit off, but then this is the really toxic one. This is gaslighting, right? Then you question yourself. Did I really hear that? Is that really what was said? Am I wrong? Am I misinterpreting it? I'm being silly. I'm being overly sensitive. What if you're not? What if you just trusted your intuition and you trusted yourself and you trusted your gut and you backed yourself with kindness and compassion and clear communication? That's the energy of Kali. I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything else for today that I particularly wanted to share. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to share, and then I'll open up to questions. I'm just going to plug my laptop in because it's running out of power. So the last thing I wanted to share with you is that recently I was teaching in a teacher training program, and it was it happened to be just a group of women. And we did a meditation where we went through different parts of the body to sort of tune into the energy of how we were feeling. So we started with the head, and I was asking the women to tune into, the vibration of the head. And some of the words, it was on Zoom, so they were writing in the chat, things like buzzing, busy, full, scattered, these types of words. And then we came down to the feet, and I invited the women to, this took some time. We did this over some time to tune into the energy of what was happening through the feet, and words like grounded, connected, steady, earth, etc., etc. And then I invited the women to tune into the energy of their womb. And I was utterly astounded by the words that were coming into the chat. Numb, empty, nothing, void. In a group of 20 women, I think one woman had something to say that was actually a feeling function. The rest were just like, it's not alive in me. It's not present. I don't know. It's numb. It's flat. Quiet. Quite a few people said quiet. This to me is really interesting, and it tells us so much about the somatic experience of everything that I'm speaking about to do with this energy of Kali. We're very connected to earth and the material realm. We have to be. It's part of being human and being alive. We feed ourselves, and we are functional as physical beings in the world. Most of us these days are pretty good also at being connected to what's going on mentally. We are relatively aware of our thoughts and even our emotions as they pass through. But the true intuition of the knowing of the deep feminine happens in the womb space in our bodies. So I want to encourage you, I want to invite all of you to start thinking about your womb space as a portal for information, in the same way that you'd think about your heart or your head or your connection to earth through your feet or your seat. And just make the inquiry. And it doesn't matter what stage of the journey you are on. This would apply for a young girl starting emerging into puberty, through fertile years, whether you have children or not, perimenopause, menopause, doesn't matter. Hysterectomy, it's an energetic imprint. It's not physical, although you may feel it physically. One way that's really beautiful to connect to the womb, depending on the climate and the weather, but is literally just get a hot water bottle and place a hot water bottle on your lower belly. That will really help you, especially if you're menstruating, to tune into the vibration of the womb space and get curious about the wisdom within that space in your body. Because Kali's energy, another symbol of Kali or another element of Kali, is blood. And part of that is the womb energy. So as we step out of only thinking through the mind and the intellect and analyzing, and more into the intuitive knowing, we can make those decisions and have those experiences from the womb space. All right. We're beautifully on time. If anyone has to leave, like, absolutely on time, feel free to. I completely understand. But I would love to open up for comments, questions, anything you'd like to share or ask. Diane has said, this has highlighted to me how much I turn the arrow on myself rather than the perpetrator. Right. That's the classic gaslighting. Oh, it must be me. And then often exacerbated by people talking about women being overly emotional or hormonal or, whatever that happens too. Yes. And, another thing I think is really important in that, Diane, is community of women that support us. So, I'm hearing more and more people talking about this idea of the sister wound, which is the idea that women don't necessarily always support each other. And I love this idea of the Artemis, like the collective of women that have each other's back, that protect each other. I think that's so needed and such a blessing. And it's something I've got to say, I've been very fortunate in frequently manifesting in my life. And it's part of the work I do. It's definitely part of my dharma to create these communities. And that's a really, really important piece in this. I'm not going to turn the arrow back on myself. Because sometimes when you are ready to turn the arrow back on yourself, what you need is a girlfriend or a collective of women who care and have your back to say, don't do that. Don't do that. This isn't you. This is them. And to be a cheerleader, to be an advocate, that's very often what we need. Monica's saying there was a practice in the womb yoga series that I use regularly that's assisted me in feeling the energy of my womb and going back to it often. Yeah, inside Bhakti Club, my membership, we have womb yoga and womb meditation practices that if you're confused about how do I get into this womb energy, yeah, we have specific practices that we do that really, really help with that. But even without those practices, it could be as simple as just a hot water bottle, tune in. Just honestly, it could be as simple as just ask yourself the question, like maybe you're dealing with a difficult situation, like you're having a little confrontation with someone, or you're feeling uncomfortable, or you're dealing with a parenting moment with children that are triggering you. Instead of immediately going to the rational mind, which is what we've been conditioned to do, just literally bring your energy, it's the pranamaya kosha again, the energy body, into the womb and ask yourself. I mean, it might sound super esoteric and woo-woo, like if you're thinking what the heck is she talking about, then I just invite you to suspend disbelief and just give it a go. Ask yourself, what is my womb telling me right now? As a doula, when I'm working with women in childbirth situations, all they need is the energy of the womb to birth their babies with ease. It's the head that gets us in so much trouble in birth, because you can't intellectually birth a baby. It happens in your body, it happens in your intuition, it happens in your instinct. Yeah, beautiful. Tanya's saying, I think I forgot about my womb since menopause. And a lot of women who've had hysterectomies also feel the same way. And another thing that can dull our connection to womb energy is being on contraceptive for a long period of time. So if you're on the pill or you've got some other kind of contraceptive device in place, that can definitely dull. It's a little bit like in the same way that antidepressants can dull our emotional range. Hormonal contraception can dull our womb energy connection. It doesn't mean that you can't still connect it, but it can make it harder. Yeah, I used to suffer in silence because I didn't want to upset anyone. The funny thing about that, Tracy, is, and again, I've seen this in my own personal experience, and I know many women in this space would agree, is it always causes more trouble. When we don't speak clearly and say what we think, often it just creates more difficulty that we have to figure out later. Whereas when we have that clarity and that direct communication with compassion, right, not Kali trampling on Shiva, but just skilled communication, it usually saves hurt feelings anyway. I'm seeing how vividly I always turn the arrow on myself. Yeah, the image is helpful, right? That the Artemis's arrow, I find it very helpful to kind of think about that and remember that. My first strong experience of Kali, this is Kel, was through leaving my ex-husband, domestic violence situation. Her presence was so strong in my life through that time, it gave me huge strength. Yes. Then on to divorce. I experienced beautiful energy in the years that follow. It's Shakti Prana, and Shakti Prana, like I said at the very beginning, is not always soft and benevolent. It's often strong. Sky is saying, I have complex multiple PTSDs. Can Kali help, or do I need more trauma therapies? You know what I would say? It's both. It's everything. So when I spoke about the 5 elements of who we are, physical body, energy body, mind, emotional realm, and spirit or soul, right? When we're healing, we tackle all 5. So if you only do therapy, that's only the mind, right? That's going to help, but it's not going to be the full picture. These days, most good therapists realize there's also a somatic piece. So a lot of therapy now includes physical, what's in the body and what's held in the body, and release of that. So we're kind of getting that piece happening more and more. The energy body and the emotional realm is much neglected, particularly energy body, subtle energy. Some of the most powerful work I've ever done in my life is working with an energy healer. Is she here? So I think my healer is here in the room. She's incredible. Sarah McGann. She may have left, but yeah, she's, I mean, I can't recommend her work highly enough. And she works purely on the level of energy, but also do the therapy, do the body work, do like tackle it, especially if it's complex PTSD and it's been going on for a long time, it's multifaceted. Throw everything at it, tackle it with all the things. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? What about if you're in menopause and have never birthed? This has nothing to do with whether you've birthed a baby. You have birthed multiple things in your life, regardless of whether you've actually physically given birth. All your creative projects, anything that you've ever endeavored to put forth into the world, every time you cook a meal, you're birthing from your womb. If you do it with love and you do it with reverence and gratitude and joy, every meal that you prepare, every conversation that you have, certainly any artistic endeavor, whether you paint or you write or you make music, all of these are forms of birthing. It's us putting the essence of who we are out into the world as women, and it's the most important thing. And actually, I'll tell you something really interesting, and I can say this with having 5 children. The biggest problem that women who've actually birthed babies make is that they forget to birth all the other things. They get so consumed by the actual physical babies that they've birthed that they forget to paint and draw and write poetry and talk to other women about how they're feeling and make beautiful altars in their homes and dress in a way that excites and enlivens them. You know, it's like the project becomes the actual physical children. And the women who I see enjoying motherhood the most, including myself, and I can honestly say I really love being a mum, it's because they're also birthing their own creative projects as well. And it doesn't have to it doesn't mean you have to write a best-selling novel or do something, you know, it's literally the way that you dress, the way that you arrange your home, just enjoying beauty. I went for a picnic in the park with a friend the other day who's got a child the same age as mine. And I'd been rushing when I left the house, and I had a water bottle and a couple of like crackers, but that was my contribution. And my friend had like the most beautiful picnic blanket, and she had a basket, and she had all these beautiful fruits, and she had a gorgeous little knife that she'd bought, like a wooden handled knife, and plates. And she was just making, I mean, it was just fruit plates, right? It wasn't anything spectacular, but the way that she did it with so much care and beauty, that's from the womb. That's the energy of the feminine, its creative mode. And I enjoyed it so much, just sitting with her and our girls playing and eating some fruit, because she created a sacred space for us in which to do it. She would laugh at me if she heard me say that, because she doesn't think of herself as someone that does that type of thing, but that's what happened. Is it okay to practice womb yoga on menstruation? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can do it at any phase of the menstrual cycle. You just need to, it's just about tuning into what's actually happening and what's present. Womb yoga is very gentle, so it's not going to be physically challenging or inappropriate. It gets so hard when you feel like you can deal with things in a strong yet feminine way, but when you try to communicate, they just jump down your throat and become abusive. So it's falling on deaf ears and doesn't get you anyway. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for naming that elephant in the room. One of the things that's really important to remember about the Kali energy, the Artemis energy, the energy of boundaries and self-trust, is that it is not about the response we get from another person. If you're in an abusive dynamic, with a partner, with, God, it could be your boss, a sibling, your parent, you know, abusive dynamics can happen in all kinds. It could be your own child, right? Once they get to teenage and adulthood. Part of what the Kali energy will teach you or will help you with is to start having boundaries and moving away from those abusive relationships. If the relationship is difficult but not abusive, and they are two very different things, then the Kali energy will help you to have deeper clarity. It'll help you to navigate it. But what it isn't about is the response we get from the other person. The other person is going to do what they're going to do, and then we get to choose, either I'm going to leave this situation. So like, I'll give you the example with my ex-husband and the bickering. The only reason that we don't, he still gives it a red hot go. He'd love to bicker with me all day long. I just don't give him any juice. I'm like, okay, we're done here. Thank you. Goodbye. And usually it diffuses, and then we can come back 24 hours later, we can talk about the same thing again, and the energy is gone. But if you get caught in the crossfire, it just escalates and gets really, really stuck. Yeah, so Sky's saying my kinesiologist saved my life. Therapies haven't. Exactly. The energy piece, kinesiology is amazing for that. Yes. Okay, any last questions? Anything anyone wants to ask or say or share? How do you set boundaries without being burnt up by the anger? I mean, with people who keep disrespecting them. Okay, this is controversial. And not everyone's ready to hear this, and it took me years to really understand this. The only way someone can disrespect your boundaries is if you don't have them in place clearly enough. It's on you if people aren't respecting your boundaries, then the boundary just has to be cleaner. It has to be clearer. And when there's an interesting energetic thing that happens with boundaries, when you're really serious about it, people can feel it and they just stop messing with you. It's when you haven't quite got it in place yet. It's back to that coffee thing I was talking about before. I'm not sure if it's a good example, but that kind of like, oh, should I have a cup of coffee? Or maybe I will. Versus, I am not a coffee drinker. Right. And this is what we do. And we do it out of love and compassion, particularly with children. It's like we try to have a boundary, but then, oh, they got sick, or this happened, or that happened, or I felt sorry for them, or maybe the boundary wasn't a good idea in the first place, or, and then we waffle with ourselves. And that's when energetically the boundary gets violated. But when you are clear, it's like an energetic force field. People can feel it. My kids, I play with this with my children, and I swear to God, they can tell. Like, if they ask me for something and I say no, and those of you with young children, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If I give a vague or a soft no, they are in. They know when it's like, I can manipulate my way into this one. Versus when I say no and it's a no, they feel it and they don't mess with it. They're like, oh, okay, it was a no. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. This is only day one. We've got 2 more days. We're going to dive in deeper. I've got so many notes. I'm just so excited to keep sharing all of this with you. But I hope that today gave you a little bit of a foundation, some things to think about. Go create some beautiful sacred spaces in your home. Go write your gratitude lists and embrace self-trust. And where it's needed, get that bow and arrow out and come back tomorrow and tell me about all the different things that you shot down, so that we can all cheerlead you and support you and sit in circle together and do this amazing work of clear boundaries and loving, compassionate self-awareness. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for being here. Namaste.